Hello, I'm Sam Davies. I'm the Independent City Councillor for Queen Edith's, and I'm here to provide you all with a video update and my reflections on my second year as your councillor. You will notice if you're proposing to vote in this May's elections that I'm not on the ballot paper. That's because I got a 3-year term when I was elected in May 21, so I'm not up for re-election until May next year. However, there are a fine array of candidates competing for your vote this year. I hope you will watch the community forum video of the hustings which took place last week and find me a good partner to represent this ward in the next 12 months. And it's going to be really important that we have a good I have a good partner, because there's a lot going on, and there will be a lot going on in the year ahead, and it's really important that you get good representation. To prepare for trying to put this recording together, I looked back at the one I took in May last year, where I reflected on my first year in office. When I looked back at that, I was struck by how I talked about a learning curve. And I think when I said that, I was optimistic that the further I went along that learning curve, the more effective I would be, and the more I would be able to grapple with the complexities of all of our systems, which I have written about at length on my blog. I think the reality of the learning curve of the second year has been to find just how broken things are, where the gaps are, where the lack of funding is, where things that should join up don't join up, where there are institutional blind spots, lack of institutional memory. And that's really quite sobering when you think about some of the challenges that this neighbourhood and this city are facing. It also means that life as your councillor can really be quite frustrating. So, for example, one of the things I talked about last year was the attempt to force, apologies for the phone going off, that happens quite a lot, my attempt to force the provision of a northern access through the GB1 site and out from Warts Causeway onto the rest of the ward, to give the residents who are going to be moving on to that new site ready access to our local facilities, such as they are, and to help the living conditions of the rest of the neighbourhood by trying to keep as many cars as possible off the roads. I went to planning committee 2 or 3 times to speak about the importance of that link. And the reality is that the planning system did not allow that provision to be made. The reasons for that relate to how the land was removed from the Greenbelt in the 2018 local plan and the policies around the principle of development at that time, and also then how the outline permission for the site was given. It's incredibly frustrating. It wasn't just me who was frustrated about it. The councillors who were on planning committee on those occasions tried very hard and very creatively to look at routes by which they could force the developer to put that active travel connection in, because they acknowledge how important it is. The reality is that that power does not exist for them. And so we had to accept that the developer is not going to make that connection. It's one tiny example of the thing I write about depressingly often, where you can see what you would want to do in order to get good outcomes for individuals or neighbourhoods or the city as a whole, but we simply don't have the powers or the funding to get us to the place we want to be. And to come back to this idea of learning curve. I do believe that, to quote one of the candidates standing for election in the ward, Cambridge is a global city governed like a small market town, and very little is going to get rectified until we can deal with those fundamental issues about our local government structures. And so you'll find a link attached to this video which relates to a petition that's been created by Edward Lee, a colleague who I worked with in Smarter Cambridge Transport, whose judgment I absolutely trust on these matters, who is petitioning for a review of local government structures in the area. And I would wholeheartedly encourage you to take a look at that and sign, because that is the scale of the reform which we need in order to be able to do sensible things here. I think also last year I was more optimistic that we were coming out of the peculiar period of the pandemic and that life would return to some sort of normality. I don't think that's what's happened. I think the phrase, or the description, perma-crisis is probably pretty close to what we've all gone through in the last year. And that concentration of both acute need and lack of resource to meet the need is something that we've seen at a household level, but it's also, in my opinion and in my experience, made it very, very difficult for local government to do the job that you would want it to do. There is so much reorganisation just going on within individual teams at the City Council and the County Council that you can be having a conversation with an officer about a project which, you know, extends for several months, and then you discover that they've left. And so I really hope, for the sake of the individual officers and for the efficient functioning of the council, that transformation process which is going on at the moment beds down, and that the officers who are left in post are able to engage with the responsibilities that they have. But from the outside, it has been incredibly frustrating. Maybe I should try and think of something positive to talk about. So, Ediva Court planning application. So I've written about this. Ediva Court are the flats behind the Queen Edith pub on Wolfston Way. The freeholder wanted to use permitted development rights to put in a new floor on top of that block of flats. And in a great example of effective collective community response, the leaseholders came together and with me built a case to persuade planning committee to turn that application down. Now, I don't know if the developer is going to have another crack at it, but you know, it was heartening to see that the system could deliver good outcomes. I guess my frustration is that those aren't happening as often as I would like them to. Another goal that I am really keen to support is the rationalisation of parking for Voi scooters and bikes. This is a trial which has been supported by the Combined Authority. It's been running for a couple of years now. It's been extended a few times, but nobody seems to get to grips with the extensive problems with scooters being left in the wrong places where they are trip hazards or blocking a path for people with mobility issues or sight issues. And again, I try and be intelligent about who I talk to and about making sure I'm speaking to people who have the right levers to solve these problems. It has been well nigh impossible to get progress with that because, as I say, the Combined Authority are the organisation running the trial. But in order to create parking bays requires the active collaboration of the County Council and the use of the TRO mechanism to make space for that. And nothing seems to join up and everything seems to move at a glacial pace. There is potential. There is potential. I'm hearing use of phrases about place-based working and asset-based community development increasingly in local government circles and the voluntary sector and so on. And what that basically means is building on the strengths that you have in your community, that's the asset-based bit, and thinking really hard about the needs and desires of places and their ability to shape their own futures. And as you can imagine, those are both things that I'm particularly passionate about. What I think everybody is feeling their way towards at the moment is how to actually turn those wonderful phrases into action on the ground. And I think with regard to place-based working, it's really important that we stop just using shorthand about wards. You know, Queen Eve this, affluent ward, wide streets, leafy streets, happy, healthy people, and start to be a bit more rigorous about the individuals living here and the particular geography that we have, whereby I would suggest we are probably the most unequal ward in the most unequal city in the country. And I've done some work looking at that for a University of Cambridge conference that I presented at earlier this week. And again, there's a link to that presentation in this file, so you can see how easy it is to be lulled by the shorthand about what's going on in the ward and the city, and how misleading that can be. And I think the big theme for me this year has been about getting information and explanation to people and helping people really interrogate who's telling them what and why, and equipping them with the ability to ask intelligent and pertinent questions. One of the pieces of work I did with that in mind was the extremely long blog I wrote about the GCP's proposals for the Sustainable Travel Zone, which I published before Christmas and which was then picked up by the Cambridge Independent and an edited version published by them. The reason that's important, I think, is because of the degree of engagement that captured. People really want to know and want to understand what's happening here. Nearly 7,500 people read the blog, and many more will have read the article in the Cambridge Independent. And it is, people may not agree with my analysis of it, but I think two things were important about it. One is that I said what I thought. I explained my views very clearly on the public record. There's no shilly-shallying around. It's all there, and people are still welcome to talk to me about it if they want to. The other is that it doesn't treat the public like mugs. It gives them detail and routes to further explore should they wish to, and suggests questions that they might like to ask other people in public positions, and bringing it round to this seasonal activity of elections. I do think we are at the limits of the business as usual model. I think the strains have become very apparent in the city in the last year, and I think there are particular flashpoints like the proposals for the redevelopment of the Hobson Street cinema, the redevelopment of the Grafton Centre, the redevelopment of the Beehive, which are really causing people to question what's going on here, what the driving forces are, and how, well, whether and how they can actually get their voices heard in the face of this most enormous global financial land grab in Cambridge. And in a spirit of being honest about what's happening there, I think it's really important that we don't just use a very lazy set of expressions that assume growth is good and assume that trickle down works and that a group of people getting very, very rich at the top translates into everybody benefiting, because I think it's very clear that it doesn't. So it's been a challenging year. It hasn't been an entirely uplifting year in terms of my mood, and I apologise to anyone I've spoken to during the course of that who's caught me in one of those more sober moments. It's important to say that lots of people in this ward are making a huge contribution to make it a more positive and pleasant and functional place, and I take my hat off to them because I know how hard it is to get any of that progressing at the moment. And I would close by encouraging you to vote with your photo ID next Thursday. Please take your photo ID, and to really think about where to put your cross and what kind of future matters to you, because in the very near future we're going to have the next round of activity related to the local plan and the GCP coming back with its presumably revised proposals for the sustainable travel zone, and these two things are going to shape the city for decades. So please vote wisely. Thank you for your support this year, and I am more than welcome, would more than welcome your feedback.